The Burning Crusade has some extremely fun PvP once you hit level 70. The problem is that so many people don't get to enjoy it for a plethora of reasons. Starting off with number 1 is the gearing issue. When the Burning Crusade originally launched, it came out with a new game mode for PvP called Arena. This had a 2v2, 3v3, and 5v5 game mode. It also came out with a separate set of gear called the Gladiators set, which was a stronger version of the honor-based High Warlord set that you could only get with the new currency system of Arena points. The only way you could get Arena points was by creating what's called an Arena team. This was a charter where you'd have to talk to a goblin, pay gold, and then come up with a team name, invite other players, then create the team, and then queue up with said team, causing your rating to go up every time you won. Once you got to your respective rating after winning however many games, you then get rewarded with arena points, which you only received one time per week every Tuesday. The higher your team's rating was, the more points that you would get. On top of that, 3v3 and 5v5 gave you significantly more points than 2v2 Arena did, which still ultimately made no sense because 2v2 was the most popular version of WoW Arena and always has been even to this day. To give you an example, if you played 2v2 and had a team rating of 1500, you would get somewhere around 700 points on the Tuesday reset. But if you played a 5v5 team and had a team rating of 1500, you would then get 1200 arena points on that same Tuesday, giving you a significant advantage in gearing, which also forced people to play 5s, which was the least popular bracket. The other problem that this system has is if your team is unavailable to play for 1 week, you will then get 0 arena points for that week with absolutely no way to reclaim them. They are simply lost forever if you didn't play at least 10 games that week. This then puts you behind on gearing since you are now 1 week behind all the people who did play, and if your team rating is low, then the points you would have been getting are also low, especially if you only played 2v2. So you can see how rapidly it deteriorates to the point where people just say, you know what, never mind, this isn't worth my time. As I was editing this video, Blizzard put out a blue post announcing that there is actually going to be no arena teams this time around in the Burning Crusade Classic, which is a phenomenal system. You are going to have the individual rating system, the same as Wrath of the Lich King Classic, allowing you to group up and queue with anybody you want at any time, which is much, much better. So great job Blizzard with this, however there are still more changes that we need. In Cataclysm Classic, Blizzard made even more changes, so that each week you would now have a total cap of 4,000 arena points per week. They also made it so that instead of getting arena points every Tuesday, you would get 250 arena points per win in any bracket of arena instantly after the game. This allowed you to gear up whenever you were playing the game instantly as opposed to waiting for every Tuesday. This 4,000 arena point cap increased by 4,000 every single week and was retroactive so that if you missed a week, you would still be able to get those previous 4,000 points at any time simply by logging in, playing, and winning an arena. This system stacked infinitely every single week until eventually you would have a large enough point cap to where you could buy all the gear for your character, which was usually in between 20 and 30,000 arena points depending on what class you played. This point system allows somebody who didn't play for the first 2 months of an expansion to come back and get full PvP gear in a couple of days simply by logging in, playing, and winning arenas, regardless of your rating or bracket. This allowed a more flexible way to play the game, even if you couldn't play every week. This obviously had unlimited benefits since it allowed not only people who couldn't play as much to play, but also people who wanted to level alts halfway through an expansion. Since this system is so much better for every single player, it is very important that Blizzard changes the TBC arena point system to the same one as Cataclysm Classic, giving not only personal team rating, removing arena teams, but also giving the 4,000 arena point weekly cap, as well as getting 250 arena points per win. Touching on that further, in the Burning Crusade they have a type of currency exclusive to this expansion in vanilla called Marks of Honor. These are specific tokens that are awarded after playing in the respective battleground. You get 3 marks for a win and 1 for a loss. This is a currency that you need for every single off part, and you need quite a lot of them. The original cost for these items was cut in half by Blizzard midway through the Burning Crusade once they realized how absurd it was to ask a player to play hundreds of battlegrounds just to get a few off parts for one character. Even though they did nerf it, it is still not enough and the Marks of Honor system needs to be completely removed. If you are a normal player and do not have PvP gear or a pre-made for your battlegrounds, then let's assume your win rate is 25% if you are lucky. With the current Marks of Honor system, you would need 10 Marks of Honor for bracers, 10 for neck, 20 for belt, and 20 for boots, on top of the tens of thousands of honor additional to these marks that you will need to purchase the gear. Keep in mind that if you lose a battleground and get stomped, you can get as little as 50 honor per loss, since the Burning Crusade does not have the daily battleground reward that was implemented in Wrath of the Lich King. This means that you would have to play over 40 battlegrounds just for the marks, and you would still not have enough honor to buy the pieces, putting you around somewhere over 60 plus battlegrounds just for a few off pieces for one season out of 4 seasons on one character. Keep in mind, you haven't even bought a trinket or a single main piece of gear yet. For all of that total, it would take close to 200 battlegrounds per character. The arena point system in Cataclysm also fixed this problem entirely by allowing you to buy every single piece of gear for your character with just arena points. In the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King, you could only buy main sets and weapons. This means that you would only have to do Battlegrounds at the very beginning of the expansion before the first arena season begins. For all these reasons, Blizzard should remove the Marks of Honor completely and convert the gearing process to the same style as Cataclysm Classic, since it is such a better system. Moving past that, in vanilla World of Warcraft there is a thing called Heartbeat. This causes someone who is in a breakable CC, for example a blind or polymorph, to instantly be taken out of a crowd control by complete RNG. They had this in the game because in vanilla, the crowd control durations are absurdly long and well over 30 seconds for certain abilities. This meant the only way to make it quote-unquote competitive was to give a random chance to break the crowd control, thus allowing the player to play again. In the Burning Crusade, they changed it so that the longest CC in the game is 10 seconds with the exception of Freezing Trap, completely negating the need for Heartbeat to exist since there is no longer 50-second polymorphs. All Heartbeat does now in TBC is break a random crowd control for no reason and make the game much less competitive and much less engaging. For these reasons, Heartbeat needs to be removed. The pre-game lobby in the Burning Crusade is around a minute and 15 seconds from the time the queue pops. This is quite a lot of time wasted for a lot of comps like Rogue Mage, for example, who only need maybe about 15 seconds to buff and make food. In retail, they have added a system where there is a lever in each of the starting rooms, and if each team pulls the lever, the game will then start in 15 seconds. This needs to be added to the Burning Crusade Classic since it affects no one negatively, because if you need more time, you simply don't pull the lever and the game doesn't start, but if you are already done buffing and don't want to wait extra time for no reason, simply pull the lever and the game begins. So for those reasons, that is a no-brainer to add. Another thing that needs to be changed is class stacking. In the Burning Crusade, there is a comp you can play called Double Rogue, which is a counter comp specifically designed for being very good into certain teams and absolutely terrible into others. This is obviously not competitive in any way, and an extremely boring playstyle that could easily be fixed by removing the ability to queue arena with two of the same class in your group. Removing class stacking would only be a massive plus for the entire community of Arena. Speaking of cheesy things, in the Burning Crusade you cannot see the enemy team's class or spec before the gates open. This is obviously a problem for a multitude of reasons and was fixed in MoP to show you the enemy team's class and spec before the gates opened. This gives double stealth teams an unfair advantage since they can start the game in stealth and get a great opener while the other team doesn't even know what they're fighting, whether it's Rogue Mage, Feral Rogue, or Resto Druid Rogue, etc. While the stealth team knows exactly what they are fighting from the time the gates open since they see them. On top of that, there are many players who will spam /who to figure out who they are fighting and then counter gear against them, which this would also negate since both teams would be able to see what classes and specs they are fighting before the gates even open. Moving on to one of the biggest elephants in the room, we are now covering PvE gear in Arena. For some classes, such as Rogue, for example, you will be using PvE gear for every single off-piece outside of your 5-piece main set. This means that if you want to be competitive in Arena, you are forced to do all of the raids every single week, waiting for an RNG drop that could actually never end up dropping, since it's completely up to getting lucky in order to get the item. This is incredibly taxing as a player who doesn't enjoy PvE, since you are forced to find a group who runs the raid, then also clear the raid, then get loot priority so you can even receive the drop, and then maybe the drop will actually come after running it for every week and week and week, and spending hours and hours and hours just to get some off pieces just so you can play the game. This is one of the biggest reasons that people get burnt out of trying to play Arena, since they don't have hours and hours and hours of extra time every week to not even play Arena, and simply go do raids to wait until they get the gear to then allowed to play the Arena. It is a redundant, outdated, and antiquated system that retail has fixed eons ago. While there are many ways you could fix this, an easy one would be to simply add PvE gear onto a new vendor that would cost Arena points. This PvE gear would have an item level of 0 and then scale up to its proper item level only when in an arena or battleground. Combining this with the 4,000 weekly point system would completely eliminate the need to raid for PvE items, which would boost the player count in PvP immensely, since the most complained about thing of all time in TBC and Wrath is having to raid for PvE gear just to play Arena. Another thing about gearing, in the Burning Crusade, you don't have access to spell penetration on your offhand or wand until Season 3. This is obviously a big oversight that they didn't recognize since they just came out with Arena and didn't really have a good grasp on how it was going to go. Later on in the expansion, Blizzard of course realized this, and in Season 3 they added a spell pen offhand and wand, which then allowed you to get some much needed spell pen since it is such a difficult stat to get in the Burning Crusade. This would be a super easy fix for Blizzard. All they would have to do is add a spell pen wand and offhand for Seasons 1 and 2. Lastly, something that needs to be changed is the ability to override your healing over time effects as well as your damage over time effects that are currently more powerful. An example of this would be you are using a trinket that buffs your overall spell power, creating a more powerful dot or healing over time effect or shield depending on your class. Once the stronger buff is on them and your trinket proc fades, you can no longer refresh that ability until it completely falls off. This means if you have a dot that has 2 seconds left, you cannot override the dot and re-put a new one on there since the other one is technically stronger than the one you'll put it on. This is obviously extremely stupid and was fixed in MoP, however, they could simply implement this into the Burning Crusade Classic since it has no purpose to be in the game. To finish it all off, we got a no-brainer. Simply remove legendary items from Arena. I am of course talking about Warglaive's Vazanoth in the Burning Crusade, as well as the Sunwell Bow, and then of course in Wrath of the Lich King, Shadowmourne. There has never been a single tournament in history where Blizzard allowed legendary items to be in a tournament for Arena, so why are they allowed in regular Arena? Nobody in the world knows. And with all that being said, that concludes the list of changes that should be made to TBC Arena, which would not only increase the player base, but would also make the game much more competitive and engaging. Thank you for watching, and we will see you guys in the next video.